My roommate loved wearing a masquerade mask and doing provocative live streams from our dorm room. At first, I never thought much of it. She deliberately wore my clothes, copied my style, and even mimicked the little details I wore every day. Since we were roommates and had similar body types, I figured she simply liked my wardrobe. I had no idea she was setting me up to take the fall for everything she did. In my previous life, I was dragged out onto the street, stripped naked, and publicly accused of being a homewrecker. Before I could even understand what was happening, a man who had lost his entire life savings because of Haley lunged at me. The first stab came so suddenly that I barely felt it. Then came another. And another. By the time he was finished, I had been stabbed 11 times. I collapsed onto the pavement, blood soaking through my clothes as the world around me blurred. The man stood over me, his face twisted with rage and despair. "You took every penny I had," he spat through gritted teeth. "And I didn't even get to see your real face. You deserve to die." As my vision faded, everything finally clicked. Haley had never been borrowing my clothes because she needed them. She had been using me as her scapegoat. The mask, my clothes, my name, the university information she had carelessly revealed to her viewers. She had built an entire identity around me, while I unknowingly stood in the line of fire. And I had been stupid enough to help her. But then, I opened my eyes. A blinding flash of crimson filled my vision. When it faded, I found myself standing inside our college dorm room. My heart stopped. The familiar desk, the half-open wardrobe, the pile of textbooks beside my bed. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. Then a familiar voice drifted toward me. "Summer, did you hear me?" I slowly turned around. Haley stood beside my closet, holding one of my dresses against herself. "Can I borrow this? I don't have anything cute to wear for my stream tonight. I'll give it back as soon as I'm done." My breathing stopped. For several seconds, I could only stare at her. This was impossible. I looked down at my hands, then around the room again. The memories came crashing back. The blood. The knife. The screaming crowd. The man's furious eyes. My own body lying helplessly on the pavement. I had been reborn. And judging from the dress in Haley's hands, I had returned to the exact day everything had started. In my previous life, Haley had constantly borrowed my clothes for her provocative dance streams. When she first started, she had acted embarrassed about it. She told me she was struggling financially and only wanted to earn a little extra money for tuition and rent. She claimed she didn't own anything nice enough to wear on camera. Feeling sorry for her, I had agreed. Every single time. I had thought I was helping a friend. Instead, I had handed her the perfect disguise. Because whenever Haley put on my clothes, covered her face with that mask, and turned on her camera, everyone assumed they were looking at me. She wasn't just borrowing my wardrobe. She was borrowing my identity. "Summer?" Haley waved a hand in front of my face. "Are you deaf?" The words snapped me out of my thoughts. I looked at her, then at the dress in her hands. All the anger I had carried from my previous life suddenly surged to the surface. "Get lost." Haley froze. The smile disappeared from her face. "Summer?" I stared at her coldly. She had probably never heard me speak to her like that before. "Why are you being so mean?" Before I could answer, Chloe, our other roommate, immediately jumped to Haley's defense. "Seriously, Summer, if you don't want to lend it to her, just say so. There's no need to be such a bitch about it." Haley's eyes quickly turned red. Then, as if she had rehearsed it 100 times, tears began rolling down her cheeks. "Summer, I know I'm poor. I know I can't afford pretty dresses like yours." Her voice trembled. "I only asked because I wanted to look nice, get more viewers, and make enough money to send something home to my family. If you didn't want to help me, you could have just said no. You didn't have to scream at me." In my previous life, those words would have made me feel guilty. Not anymore. I stood up slowly. Then I walked toward her until we were standing face to face. "You want to borrow my dress?" Haley hesitated. "Fine." Her expression brightened for half a second. Then I continued. "Take off the mask." Her smile vanished. "And show your real face on camera." The room went silent. "You wear my clothes, hide your face, and then casually reveal our university and my journalism major to your viewers. Your username is literally my name, Summer." I laughed bitterly. "What exactly are you trying to make your followers believe?" Haley's lips parted, but no words came out. "You made us promise not to tell anyone about your streams." "Fine. We kept your secret." I pointed toward her. "But now everyone on campus is whispering about me. People think I'm the one posting those provocative videos. My voice grew sharper with every word. You get all the money and gifts. I get all the rumors, insults, and humiliation. Haley's face paled. And can you at least wear my clothes properly for once? I glanced at the dress she was holding. You always pull down the straps and leave the top half unbuttoned. My eyes narrowed. What? Is it physically painful for you to keep the neckline where it belongs? Chloe looked annoyed. Summer, that's enough. But I wasn't finished. My gaze landed on the small beauty mark drawn on Haley's chest. A tiny imitation of mine. Exactly where mine was. I pointed at it. And that. Haley instinctively covered it with her hand. You even drew a fake beauty mark in the exact same place as mine. Her face turned white. Haley, do you really think you can hide behind that mask forever? For a moment, nobody spoke. My sudden outburst had completely stunned her. Then Haley burst into tears. Real tears this time, although I couldn't tell whether they came from hurt or fear. Chloe immediately crossed her arms. Summer, back off. Haley is just trying to make a living. Cut her some slack. I looked at her. Her struggles aren't my fault. I paused. But the rumors destroying my reputation are definitely hers. Chloe rolled her eyes. I tilted my head. Actually, Chloe, do you know what kind of people die first in horror movies? She frowned. Who? People like you. Her eyebrows shot up. The ones who always try to play the savior. Why? I gave her a cold smile. Because they keep defending the wrong person until it's too late. Chloe's face darkened. Fuming, she grabbed Haley by the arm and dragged her toward the door. Come on. Haley looked back at me through tear-filled eyes. For just a second, I caught something beneath her wounded expression. Fear. Then the door slammed shut behind them. I stood there in silence. My hands were still trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was anger. Haley and I had always had remarkably similar figures. If she wore a mask and one of my outfits, anyone who didn't know us well could easily mistake her for me. In my previous life, she had turned that resemblance into a weapon. She would wear my clothes, hide behind her mask, and act flirtatiously in front of the camera. She called her viewers babe. She promised dates to whoever sent her the biggest gifts. And whenever a conversation became too personal, she would move it off the streaming platform. At the time, I had thought she was simply trying to make money. Now I knew better. Every little thing she did had been carefully pushing the consequences toward me. She had been building a trap around my identity, and I had unknowingly helped her tighten every knot. But this time, I knew exactly where the trap was, and I had no intention of stepping into it again. I never knew exactly what Haley discussed with the men who watched her streams, but I noticed the changes. She suddenly started spending money like water. Designer handbags appeared on her bed. Luxury jewelry arrived in neatly wrapped boxes. Expensive shoes and clothes piled up in our already cramped dorm room. She had gone from worrying about tuition and rent to casually carrying things that cost more than a semester of college. I could only assume she was taking huge amounts of money from these men by promising them what they wanted to hear. A relationship, a private meeting, a chance to finally meet the mysterious woman behind the mask. Then one day, Haley handed me a luxury designer bag. Summer, go to this address. She smiled brightly. I set up a birthday surprise for you. In my first life, I had believed her. That was my mistake. The address led me straight into a nightmare. The wife of one of Haley's married viewers was waiting for me there, surrounded by several other people. The designer bag in my hands became the evidence they needed. Her husband had bought expensive gifts for the masked streamer. And everyone believed that streamer was me. Haley had copied my hairstyle. She wore my clothes. She had even copied the beauty mark on my chest. To strangers, there was no difference. They tore my clothes off in the middle of the street while I screamed and begged them to check my identity. Nobody listened. Then the man Haley had scammed out of his life savings found me. He called me Summer. I desperately told him he had the wrong person. He didn't listen. The knife plunged into my stomach. Once. Twice. Again and again. 11 times. I died trying to convince a man that I wasn't the woman who had stolen his money. This time, I wasn't going to let history repeat itself. That very afternoon, I went to a clinic and had my beauty mark permanently removed. When I looked at the tiny patch of skin afterward, I felt strangely relieved. One piece of Haley's disguise was gone. Then I went straight to a salon. I want a completely different color, I told the stylist. Something dramatic. A few hours later, I walked out with fiery red hair. My usual dark hair had been transformed into thick, vibrant waves that cascaded down my back. When I returned to the dorm, Haley was sitting at her desk. The moment she looked up and saw me, she nearly fell out of her chair. Summer. She jumped to her feet. Why didn't you tell me you were dyeing your hair? I walked past her and stopped in front of the mirror. Honestly, I almost laughed. The red suited me far better than I'd expected. I ran my fingers through the voluminous waves and smiled. Why should I have to tell you? Haley stared at me as though I'd committed some unforgivable crime. Because we're best friends. She pointed at my hair. You're supposed to tell me so we can match. Then she stomped her foot. I hate looking like twins with people, especially with you. I slowly turned around. Especially with me? That's not what I meant. Really? I copied her exact posture, then deliberately stomped my foot. Haley, you're guilt-tripping me on purpose. Her mouth fell open. For a second, she looked like she wanted to scream. But her scheduled live stream was starting soon. There was no way she had enough time to run to a salon and dye her hair to match mine. Next time you change your hair, you have to tell me in advance. I rolled my eyes. Says who? Haley opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her face turned red with frustration. Then she grabbed her phone and stormed away. A few minutes later, I heard the balcony door slide open. Haley carried her ring light and tripod outside. She was starting her stream. I waited until she had gone live, then logged into a burner TikTok account. I wanted to see what she would do. Sure enough, Haley had found a solution. A filter. On my screen, her hair suddenly appeared as fiery red waves. She was wearing the same vintage silver masquerade mask as before, hiding every inch of her face. Then the music started. Haley swayed her hips slowly, deliberately playing to the camera. Her voice came through the speakers, sweet and sultry. Hey, boys. If you like what you see, send me a sports car gift. She leaned closer to the camera. The top donor tonight gets access to my private Snapchat. The chat exploded. Oh my god, Summer looks even hotter with red hair. Damn, what a body. I'd love to get a taste of that. That beauty mark on her chest is driving me crazy. Haley smiled behind her mask. Then she danced even harder. Boys, the app just launched some new GIFs. I really want to see how pretty the special effects look. Her bait worked immediately. Virtual GIFs began flooding the screen. Sports cars. Diamonds. Luxury cars. Colorful animations exploded across the live stream one after another. Haley's excitement was obvious. She kept reading the usernames of her biggest donors aloud, thanking them in that soft, flirtatious voice she had perfected. I stared at the screen. Somewhere in that chat were the people who had ruined my previous life. The man who eventually stabbed me. And the cheating husband whose wife had sent a mob after me. Neither of them knew the woman behind the mask wasn't me. Not yet. I had always been somewhat introverted. Normally, the idea of deliberately putting myself in front of thousands of strangers would have made my stomach twist. But I didn't have the luxury of hiding anymore. If I wanted to clear my name, I needed proof. And if I wanted to separate myself from Haley, I needed people to see our faces side by side. So, I sent a request to join her live stream from my burner account. Haley immediately declined. I sent another request. She declined again. I kept sending them. Finally, she groaned. Ugh, someone keeps spamming join requests. She glanced at the screen. Hang on, boys. Let me block them real quick. Then a comment appeared. Just accept it. Do a PK battle, and I'll send you a TikTok universe gift. Haley's entire attitude changed. The greed in her eyes was almost comical. Well, she smiled. Since Lucas wants to see it, I guess I can accept the request. Lucas was my friend, and I'd already texted him exactly what to comment. A second later, Haley clicked accept. The screen split into two. Her masked face appeared on one side, and my completely bare, unmasked face appeared on the other. For one beautiful second, Haley forgot to breathe. The silence that settled over the split screen was so thick you could hear the subtle hum of Haley's ring light through her stream's audio. On the left sat Haley, red-haired via a cheap digital filter, masked in silver, leaning forward in a position meant to highlight her chest. On the right sat me. My real, physical, natural fiery red hair framed a face completely uncovered, lit only by the standard fluorescent lights of our dorm room. For 3 seconds, the chat didn't move. Then, like a dam breaking, the comment section exploded into pure chaos. Wait, who is that on the right? Is that a glitch? Why are there two of them? Wait, the girl on the right is actually in the room. Look at the background. It's the same dorm room. Haley's hand shot up to cover her webcam, but her reaction was a fraction of a second too late. Oops, I said, leaning closer to my phone screen with a casual, easy smile. I made sure to tilt my head so the camera caught the clear, clean skin on my chest, where my beauty mark used to be. Sorry to interrupt your stream, Haley. I just wanted to ask if you could stop using the red hair filter. I literally just got my hair dyed 2 hours ago, and it feels a little weird that you're trying to digital match my entire look in real time. The chat went feral. Haley. Her name is Haley. Wait, so the streamer isn't Summer? She's using a filter to fake her hair color to look like her roommate? Haley's face behind the mask flushed deep crimson. Her fingers twitched near her phone. Summer, what are you doing? She hissed under her breath, trying to keep her voice down so her mic wouldn't pick it up, but Lucas's gift had triggered a high-tier battle mode, automatically boosting audio sensitivity. End the call. You're ruining my stream. Ruining it? I blinked innocently, looking right into my camera. I'm just living in my room, Haley. You're the one who came out onto the balcony to go live using my name as your handle. By the way, everyone watching, my name is Summer. I'm a journalism major. This girl streaming behind the mask is my roommate, Haley. She's been borrowing my clothes and using my name to host these streams because she claims she's too broke to afford her own wardrobe. I paused, letting the weight of my words land, before adding with a sweet, razor-sharp smile. So, if any of you have been sending thousands of dollars thinking you were talking to me, I hate to break it to you, but you've been duped. Haley panicked. She slammed her hand down on her screen and abruptly ended the live stream, severing the connection. Outside on the balcony, I heard the sharp sound of her tripod collapsing against the concrete, followed by stomping footsteps. A second later, the balcony door crashed open. Haley stood in the doorway, her mask ripped off, her eyes wide with unadulterated fury. Are you insane? She screamed, her voice cracking. Do you have any idea how much money I was about to make from that PK battle? Lucas was going to send a TikTok universe. That's thousands of dollars. Money you earned by pretending to be me? I said, my voice eerily calm as I stood up from my desk. I picked up a small bottle of rubbing alcohol and a cotton pad, deliberately wiping down my immaculate, mark-free chest in full view of her. It's over, Haley. The mask is off. The backlash from that 3-minute broadcast was instantaneous. Within hours, forum threads on campus message boards began popping up. Students who had previously whispered about me in lecture halls, assuming I was the provocative mask streamer, were now replaying clips of the split-screen stream. The realization spread rapidly through the journalism department. Summer wasn't the streamer. Haley was using Summer as a skin suit. The sudden shift in public perception left Haley completely isolated. When she walked into the cafeteria the next morning, people didn't whisper about her glamour. They laughed at her desperate attempt to mimic me. Even Chloe, who had spent weeks acting as Haley's personal knight in shining armor, was beginning to look uncomfortable. Haley, Chloe said tentatively that afternoon as we all sat in the dorm room. Maybe you should just stream without the mask? Or use your own name. People are calling you a catfish on the university confessional page. Shut up, Chloe. Haley snapped, her hands trembling as she scrolled through her tanking view counts. Since the stream, her main donors had gone dead silent. The illusion was shattered. You don't understand anything. If I don't wear the mask, nobody watches. They don't want me. They wanted the mystery. Or rather, they wanted the girl whose real-life credentials Haley had dropped like breadcrumbs to make herself seem reachable, the journalism major with the distinct style and real-world presence. I sat at my desk, quietly drafting an article for the campus newspaper about online impersonation and digital fraud. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The panic rolling off Haley in waves was pure poetry. Summer, Haley suddenly said, her tone shifting violently from rage to a sickeningly sweet whine. She walked over to my bed and sat on the edge, looking at me with large, watery eyes. Summer, please. I'm sorry about yesterday. I was just stressed. You know I'm struggling. My tuition payment is due next week, and if I don't pay it, the dean said I'll be expelled. I slowly closed my laptop lid and looked at her. And I set up an apology stream for tonight, she whimpered, wringing her hands. I told my top donors that yesterday was just a prank. If you could just come on stream for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and tell them we share the account as a joke, I can save my contract with the talent agency. Please, Summer. I'll give you half the money. I looked at her face, the frantic, scheming look hidden beneath fake tears. In my past life, this was the exact moment I would have felt pity. I would have thought, she's just desperate. She doesn't mean any harm. Half the money? I asked quietly.
Yes, half.
Tens of thousands, she urged, thinking she had caught me. No, thanks, I said, opening my laptop again. I prefer earning my money without carrying a target on my back. Haley's face hardened, the sweetness vanishing like mist. You're going to regret this, Summer, she whispered, her voice laced with poison. You think you're so clean and righteous? We'll see who gets the last laugh. She grabbed her designer bag, the very same one she had tried to hand me in my past life, and stormed out of the room. I knew that look. She was backed into a corner, and a cornered rat always bites. 3 days later, the trap was laid. I was sitting in the campus library studying for my midterms when a high-end delivery courier walked into the lobby, holding an elegant, gold-embossed box tied with a satin ribbon. He looked around before calling out my name. Summer Reed. I raised my hand. Yes, this was sent to you, the courier said, handing me the box and a signed delivery receipt. From an anonymous admirer. The sender left a note saying it's for the birthday surprise set up at the Grand Suite at the Metropole Hotel tonight. I looked down at the box. Inside was a stunning, backless crimson designer gown, matching my new hair perfectly, and a keycard to room 804 at the luxury Metropole Hotel downtown. My blood ran cold for a fraction of a second as memories of my previous life flashed behind my eyes. The Metropole Hotel. Room 804. In my first life, Haley had handed me a luxury bag and sent me to this exact address under the guise of a birthday party. When I arrived, I was ambushed by the furious wife of a wealthy corporate donor named Victor Vance, a man Haley had scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars by promising an exclusive affair. The wife had stripped me, publicly humiliated me, and paved the way for Victor's bankrupt, vengeful victim to find me on the street hours later with a knife. Haley had set up the exact same scene. She had accepted Victor Vance's expensive gifts using my identity, promised him a night at the Metropole, and tipped off his volatile wife that Summer Reed would be waiting in room 804 wearing a crimson gown. She wanted me destroyed. She wanted the mob to rip me apart, so her hands would remain clean. I looked at the crimson gown. Then I looked at the keycard. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Thank you, I told the courier. I took the box, walked straight to the campus printing center, and made several high-resolution copies of Haley's live-stream chat logs, her financial withdrawal receipts from her public streaming profile, which I had hired an IT classmate to scrape, and a legal affidavit detailing her ongoing identity theft. Then, I picked up my phone and called a private investigative agency, as well as the local police precinct's fraud division. Hello? I'd like to report a massive ongoing financial scam involving impersonation, wire fraud, and extorted luxury gifts, I said smoothly into the receiver. And I know exactly where the culprit will be tonight. At 7:45 p.m., the hallway of the 8th floor of the Metropole Hotel was dead quiet. Inside room 804, the lights were dimmed, soft jazz played from a speaker, and a bottle of expensive champagne sat in a bucket of ice. Haley stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the straps of the backless crimson gown. She had stolen the dress out of my locker after I left for class, convinced that if I wouldn't go to the trap, she would carry out the backup plan, frame me remotely by taking photos in the room using my ID, leaving my stolen wallet on the nightstand, and slipping out right before Victor Vance and his wife arrived. You thought you were so smart, Summer, Haley muttered to herself, putting on the silver masquerade mask and admiring her silhouette. Once Victor's wife finds her wallet and ID in this room and sees the live stream footage of Summer accepting his wire transfers, no one will ever believe you. She pulled out her phone, taking a series of provocative selfies positioned near the bed, deliberately placing my driver's license, which she had lifted from my desk earlier that morning, clearly in the frame on the bedside table.
Click, click.
Suddenly, the electronic lock on the hotel room door beeped. Haley froze. Victor wasn't supposed to be here for another 15 minutes. The door swung wide open. But it wasn't a solitary wealthy man who walked in. It was a wall of furious, imposing people. At the front was Mrs. Vance, a formidable woman in a tailored suit, surrounded by 3 private security guards. Behind her stood 2 uniformed officers from the city police department, a legal representative holding a briefcase, and right at the back of the group, me. I walked into the room wearing simple jeans and a black turtleneck, holding a tumbler of iced coffee. What is this? Haley shrieked, backing away toward the window, her voice high and panicked. Who are you people? Summer, what did you do? I didn't do anything, Haley, I said mildly, taking a sip of my coffee. You're the one in my dress, in a room registered under a fake name, with my stolen driver's license on the nightstand. Mrs. Vance didn't waste a single second. She marched forward, her face a mask of absolute cold fury, and snatched the silver masquerade mask right off Haley's face. Hey, give that back. Haley screamed, trying to cover her face with her hands. So you're the little parasite, Mrs. Vance spat, throwing the mask onto the floor and crushing it beneath her heel with a brutal snap. The one who extracted over $200,000 from my husband's accounts over the last 6 months under threat of releasing fabricated extortion material. I don't know what you're talking about. Haley sobbed, shrinking back against the headboard. I'm just a student. Summer is the one who runs the account. Look at her hair. Look at the driver's license. We've already audited the IP addresses and bank routing numbers, Miss Vance. One of the police officers interrupted, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. The accounts receiving the money from Mr. Vance, as well as several other donors, belong directly to a bank account under the name of Haley Vance. We also have subpoenaed logs from TikTok verifying that the account host's facial recognition data matches you, not Summer Reed. Haley's face drained of every drop of color. No, that's impossible. The filter you used was tracked by the app server logs, the officer continued coldly. You deliberately used an impersonation overlay. That elevates this from civil fraud to grand larceny, identity theft, and extortion. Chloe, who had been brought along by the police as a material witness to identify our living situation, stood near the doorway with her jaw open. She looked at Haley in total horror, finally realizing the depth of the manipulation she had been defending for months. Haley, Chloe whispered, her voice shaking. You actually stole her identity? You were setting her up this whole time. Haley looked around the room, at the police, at Mrs. Vance's towering security guards, at Chloe's disgusted face, and finally, at me. I stood near the door, my posture relaxed, watching her with cold, unwavering eyes. Summer, please. Haley dropped to her knees on the plush carpet, grabbing at the hem of my jeans, her mascara running down her cheeks in dark trails. Please tell them. Tell them we did it together. I'll give you all the money. Don't let them arrest me. I'll go to prison. I stepped back, pulling my hem out of her grasp. In my past, I used to think you were just desperate, I said softly, leaning down so only she could hear my voice over her hysterical sobs. I thought if I helped you, you'd be grateful. But you didn't want help, Haley. You wanted a human shield. You wanted me to die for your greed. Haley's eyes widened in sudden, absolute terror. She didn't understand what I meant by past, but the utter lack of mercy in my voice struck her deeper than any legal threat. Haley Vance, you are under arrest, the officer declared, grabbing her arms and pulling her up to click the handcuffs around her wrists. As the police led a weeping, screaming Haley down the carpeted hallway of the Metropole Hotel, a man stepped out of the elevator at the end of the hall. He was unkempt, wearing a worn jacket, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. He carried a heavy leather bag slung over his shoulder. My heart gave a sudden, violent thud in my chest. It was him. The man who, in my previous life, had lost his entire life savings to Haley's scams. The man who had chased me down on the pavement, screaming about his stolen life, before plunging a knife into my chest 11 times. In this life, he had tracked down the address Haley had sent him earlier that afternoon, the hotel where she had promised to finally meet him in person if he sent his last $50,000. He stood in the hallway, watching the police drag Haley out. Haley, the man gasped, his voice raspy and broken. He looked at the screaming girl in the crimson dress, then down at the crushed silver mask the officer had dropped in the hallway. He looked at her bare face. Then he looked at me, standing calmly beside the officers, completely unmasked, completely different. You, the man whispered, staring at Haley. You're the girl from the screen. The voice, it was you. Haley, sobbing hysterically, barely looked at him. Get away from me, you creep, she shrieked at him as the police pushed her toward the elevator. Officers, keep him away from me. He's a stalker. The man stood frozen as the elevator doors closed on Haley and the police. His shoulders slumped. The heavy leather bag fell from his hand, spilling stacks of court notices and bank foreclosure letters onto the floor. He collapsed onto his knees in the hallway, burying his face in his hands, weeping not with rage, but with the hollow, devastating realization that he had destroyed his life for a hollow illusion. I walked over to him slowly. I didn't hate him. In my past life, he was the monster who killed me, but in truth, he was just another broken shell that Haley had scraped clean and discarded to fuel her own vanity. I pulled a card from my pocket, the contact number for a legal aid pro bono clinic that specialized in recovering assets from financial fraud victims, and placed it gently on the floor beside his trembling hands. "She's going to state prison," I said quietly. "The police are seizing all her assets tonight. If you contact this lawyer, you can file a claim to recover what she took from you." The man looked up at me through tear-filled eyes, bewildered. Who are you?" I adjusted my jacket, looking down at him with a calm, peaceful mind. "I'm just someone who refused to pay for her crimes," I said softly. 3 months later, the university was quiet as the autumn leaves began to fall across the quad. The grand larceny and extortion trial of Haley Vance had concluded in a matter of weeks. Faced with overwhelming digital evidence, bank records, and the testimony of multiple victims, including Mrs. Vance and the ruined donor, Haley was sentenced to 7 years in a state penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. Her name was wiped from the university roster, her modern designer goods were auctioned off by the court to reimburse her victims, and her online presence was permanently erased. Chloe had moved out of our dorm room the week after the arrest, unable to look me in the eye out of sheer embarrassment and shame for her role in enabling Haley. I ended up having the room entirely to myself for the rest of the semester. On a crisp Tuesday afternoon, I sat by the window in our room, the afternoon sun spilling across my desk. My hair was still a rich, vibrant crimson. My skin was smooth, unblemished, and free of any fake marks. My laptop was open, displaying the front page of the university paper. My investigative article on digital impersonation and financial predatory behavior in live streaming culture had won the Regional Journalism Award, earning me a full scholarship for my final 2 years. I closed the laptop and picked up a warm cup of tea, looking out at the balcony where Haley used to set up her ring light and tripod. In my first life, I died bleeding on cold pavement, a silent victim to someone else's greed, trapped inside an identity that was never mine. In this life, I tore down the illusion, stripped away the mask, and handed the consequences back to the person who created them. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest, and smiled. The mask was gone. The narrative was mine. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was finally free.
The moral of the story is, if your roommate steals your wardrobe and beauty mark to scam millionaires, just dye your hair red and let her handle the angry mob.